So the LG V30 came out in Q3 of 2017, which is almost 2 years ago, and at launch the price was $800, which technically made it the second most expensive phone right next to the iPhone. I had very high hopes for this phone because of the quad DAC, because of the dual cameras and sign mode for video, AMOLED display, but I don't know, it didn't really tick all those boxes once I started playing with it. The reason this phone is relevant nowadays is because you can find one for as low as $150, let's say to $250, but the prices drop significantly, whereas the hardware is still very relevant. So to dig into the review, as for the design is very similar to Galaxy S8 with one crucial difference, and that is that the phone is wider because the screen does not go into the side of the phone. It's rather flat, and then you have bezels on the side, which you don't have on the Galaxy S8. So even though it's an 18:9 aspect ratio, the phone is actually wider in the hand, whereas I do prefer the Samsung's because it's much easier to handle. Like it's a few millimeters wider, but honestly, it does make a big difference. The top and the bottom bezels are the same as on the S8, and there is a single bottom firing speaker, yet again, same as the S8. The specs are the same. You get 4 gigabits of RAM, Snapdragon 835. It's a glass sandwich, so you get glass in the back, you get glass in the front, but with a few crucial differences that I actually really like. Number one, the power button and the fingerprint scanner are embedded together in the back. It takes some getting used to, but after some time you actually realize that it's much more natural than on the other phones, which is on the side. Right hand side being much better, and left hand side being a real disaster. Number two, the volume rockers are separated, which makes it much easier to discern whether or not you're getting the volume up or down. Now, a few people have reported a certain issue that I have as well, and if you take a look on the side, there is a white line, and apparently the light from the AMOLED is protruding through the sides. Now, I've done some research, and people say this is because, number one, the black coating on the front panel is very thin, and then the adhesive that LG used is apparently transparent, whatever that means. So technically it doesn't mean that the display is not glued on to the phone proportionately and correctly. It's just that the light is passing through for these reasons. And as for the design, that's pretty much it. It's very sturdy, it's very robust. I dropped it once, not even a dent, not a scratch. I do definitely suggest putting on case as I do, because the phone is very slippery without it. Doesn't have to be anything too expensive, but you know, it'll keep it in your hand, it'll keep it on the table, and it'll keep it in your pocket, definitely. As for the display, there are pros and cons to it. Number one, it's an OLED display with a 1440p resolution, and it's a gorgeous display, it really is. But for my intents and purposes, I don't like it, because if we dive down into the settings of the display, number one, what I do like is that you can change the resolution, which for me is great because you improve performance and you extend battery life. This is why I keep it at 1080p, because it's very difficult to see the difference between 1080p and 1440 unless you're using VR. But what I did have a problem with is that there is no professional mode. Like whichever mode you choose for the display, the colors are going to be excruciatingly painfully vivid and punchy, and if you're a kid, if you're a teenager, or even a student and you're viewing content like YouTube and whatever, this is fine, it's great, you know, everything looks colorful. But I take a lot of photos, and for social media I like to edit my photos on the go on the phone, and for that reason I don't like it. Brightness, the display gets very bright in direct sunlight. I never had any problems. It doesn't get as dim as the Samsung display when it's completely dark. Samsung displays get much dimmer, which in the middle of the night is much easier for your eyes. But nevertheless, if you're a content consumer, this is a great display. If you like to edit videos or media on the go, no, then completely avoid this, because there is no sRGB setting for it. I even went through the developer options and I couldn't find it. Moving on to the sound, you get a single bottom firing speaker, which is not as loud as I would like. It's very clear, it's crisp. The mids are very clearly pronounced, and you can hear that they are boosted. When my phone rings, when I get a notification, I can hear it very clearly, even when I'm listening to music, if I'm in the kitchen cooking or taking a shower. Like, it's really great, but it's nothing too special. If you're watching a lot of YouTube, then you definitely need to invest in a phone like the S9 or the XZ2 that has a pair of stereo speakers or a Pixel, because for YouTube or Netflix this is not gonna do you any good. um, as for the software is really heavily skinned. I'm running Android 7. I couldn't get over-the-air update. I couldn't get an update through the LG PC Suite or Software Companion. I tried both. It keeps telling me that my phone is updated to the latest version. Like, there is nothing I could have done to get it up to Android 8, and it's shameful that it does not have Android 9. So I went through the forums and I saw that a lot of people were complaining about this because apparently half of the users got the Android 8 update, half of them didn't. So it's a hit and miss when you're buying this phone. You might get it, your model might not get it. Like, I'm not really sure why, if this is a regional issue or whatever, but it's a hit and miss. So keep that in mind if you're going for this phone. The software is heavily skinned. Also, it lacks a lot of features. The apps that you do not use or you do not like cannot be disabled. They can only be hidden, which is also a problem because they still keep running in the background. And this is a Snapdragon 835 phone. So it'll keep eating a lot of processes in the background. For example, the Google Assistant is always on for me, even though I'm in China and I cannot use Google. On my Sony device or a Samsung device, I can completely disable this, but here I can't, and for me it's absolutely useless. So that's another thing. Like I said, it's heavily skinned. It doesn't really bog down. It does stutter from time to time, happens very rarely, but it's not something that I would actually prefer. Like I said, this probably is a subjective thing, personal preference, but keep that in mind as well. As for the cameras, now this is where I was shocked the most, because the phone offers you 3 cameras. There is a selfie camera and there are 2 cameras in the back, the regular one and the wide lens one. And first and foremost, I had a big issue with the actual camera cover, the lens cover, because they get smudgy so easily and there is no oleophobic coating. The smudges are producing flares, and it took me a while when I was shooting to actually figure out why this was happening. And I have to actually clean the lens every single time I want to use the camera, which is really a problem because a lot of times, even if I clean it, there is still a smudge somewhere, and then I get lens flares and exposure problems, and it's an absolute nightmare. If you take a lot of selfies, like if you're a selfie person, definitely avoid this phone. Like, if you take a lot of selfies, don't even consider this phone. Stop watching the review and just go look for something else. The selfie camera is absolutely useless. I will try to go through the camera and see, because I did take a lot of selfies, especially at the beginning. For example, this is a low light selfie. The colors are completely washed out, and I am actually standing in front of a lamp trying to get as much hair and as much detail into the picture, and the amount of post-processing, and it's a complete hit and miss. Like, it's almost impossible to get a good selfie. In a well-lit environment, this is where I'm actually outside, and as you can see, the exposure of light behind me is atrocious. The colors are washed out, the greenery is washed out, my head is shining like I have an aureole over my head. Like, the selfie camera is an absolute nightmare. Inside here I have a lens flare, and this is an actual closed curtain, and this is after me cleaning the lens. Like, this is the regular lens, this is not the wide lens. Even when you're using the main camera, if you're in a low light situation, you're gonna have a lot of problems trying to get a proper photo. This is manual mode, which kind of makes it a little more acceptable, but with this camera you cannot just point and shoot. You actually have to know what you're doing all the time, and in order to get a proper shot. In a well-lit environment, even when we're inside, this is a picture of my kid playing in a ball pit, and this is the wide-angle camera. Having a wide-angle camera is an absolute blessing in disguise. Like, a wide-angle camera should be on every single phone, and this is actually ultra-wide. For certain situations where you're inside, where you want to capture the moment, and this camera is irreplaceable. But the problem with LG's ultra wide camera is that it really needs a good lit environment in order to produce good photos. Outside, I also managed to get some awesome photos with the ultra wide camera. This is with no filters, just what the phone managed to capture. The dynamic range is great, the exposure is great, but if you try taking this photo with a regular camera, your exposure and dynamic range would be much worse. So technically on this phone, like, this is the regular camera inside one more time, and the exposure is absolutely ridiculous. Like, it really doesn't make sense. The bottom line on the camera is that if you want to take stills, you really need to know what you're doing. Most of the time you will be using the ultra wide lens. The selfie camera is absolutely useless. Don't even try to use it. It doesn't work. I couldn't get a decent photo from it. It's shaky, it's blurry, the exposure is off, so no, definitely not. As for the videos, my video experience was absolutely great. I was using the sign video option when my kid was running outside and playing. The stabilization on the camera is really great. Like, you're gonna get footage that looks like it was shot on a professional camera. And there is a video on YouTube where a certain reviewer has shot the Walter Mitty scene with longboarding downhill, and it really is. Using sign video on this phone is gonna give you some really awesome footage. So if you take a lot of photos, this will be great. And yeah, this is my wife having a wonderful time. So that's pretty much it for the camera. If you have any additional questions for the camera, leave them in the comments and I will try to answer them as best as possible, because I'm trying to keep the review as short as possible, but it becomes very difficult. As for the audio, number one, the actual player is very similar to Sony's music player with all the settings. The problem is that there is no such thing as, yeah, I need to connect the headset for this. There is no such thing as an actual manual setting. For the music, I didn't like it. I thought that the hi-fi quad DAC is going to be this miraculous experience, and then I plugged in my headphones and I couldn't get the sound I wanted because there is no manual settings. You only have presets that they thought would be most appropriate for you. The impedance on my headphones is 24 ohms. They should be able to get the most out of the hi-fi DAC. I really did not enjoy the sound coming out of this. It was all over the place. One song like this, second song like this. There was always a certain range missing, whether it was mid-range or I had Bs in the high frequencies. It was really not as pleasant as I thought it would be. Now, as for you gamers, I play a lot of games, and this is a Snapdragon 835 phone. The performance of games when it comes to the GPU is really good. This is Implosion. This is a $10 game on Play Store. This is a AAA title, very demanding game. However, the manufacturer Rayark has chosen not to update this, so this game, even though I paid a premium price for it, will not work on Android 9. So if you have Android 9, this game does not work, even though the developer has taken $10 from you and they are not updating it. So as you can see, the game is absolutely fluid. There is not a single frame drop, no input lag, no stutter, no block, nothing. I can play this as fluently as I would play it on any Snapdragon 855 phone, and you would not be able to see the difference. And like I said, for video games, for I don't know, watching YouTuber videos, this display is really good. The punchy colors, the vibrancy, the everything, really awesome. But other than that, yeah, I don't want to repeat myself. So as you can see, games run really smoothly. However, because this is a Snapdragon 835 phone, which is a 2-generational chipset right now, and you get a certain screen resolution which is high, and then you get a heavily skinned LG's operating system or UI, there is a certain problem with video games. If, for example, you play something that requires fast input, like I play Brim, you're gonna have a problem where the game is gonna work fast, it's gonna work smooth, but it's not gonna register every single input that you make. And when you're playing a runner, and you get in a very, very tight situation, the game speeds up and you're at difficulty level 4 or 5. See, it doesn't really do exactly what I want. When you really have to maneuver yourself left and right, and see, it's not picking up, because technically what I'm doing, I'm just swiping so that I can stay in the middle lane most of the time. A lot of times it either doesn't register my input or registers something completely ridiculous, and this is a problem that it has too many things running in the background, which is heavy on the CPU, and then it just does not respond fast enough to whatever you're trying to do in the video game. It's not that noticeable now at low speeds, but if I play this up until difficulty level 5 or 6, when the game gets really intense, then there would definitely be a problem, so keep that in mind. Battery life for me was absolutely awesome. I used this phone yesterday, and as you can see, I have half a battery left. I get 6 to 7 hours of screen on time with video games, YouTube videos, music streaming, and so on. So as for battery on 1080p resolution, I really had no problems whatsoever. And that's pretty much it. I didn't get out of the phone as much as I wanted. It was honestly a disappointment for me, especially in the audio and camera department. But like I said, for the price, if it suits you, if this is what you want, the pros are it has an ultra-wide camera, which really works great most of the time. You have a wonderful OLED display, and the battery life is really great. In the audio department, it lacks stereo speakers. I didn't like the headphone experience. The selfie camera is absolutely trash, and that's pretty much it. If you have any other comments, write them down. If you have any other questions, write them down in the comments, and I will try to answer them as best as possible. And yeah, have a good one.